Hare Krishna and welcome to the Bhagavad-gita lecture. Today we are going to study chapter 6 from the Bhagavad-gita, and the verses are 20 to 23. They are like in one group together like that. But first we start with the invocation mantras. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So Lord Krishna is saying in Sanskrit, Yatro paramate chitang nirudam yoga sevaya yatra chaivat manatmanang pasyanatmani tushyate sukham atyantikam yattad buddhi grahyam atindriyam veti yatra nachayvayang stitas chalati tatvataha yang labdva chaparang labham manyate nadikam tataha yasmin stito nadhukena gurunapi vichalayate tanvidyad dukkha sangyoga viyogam yoga sangitam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON. So Srila Prabhupada has translated this verse, and Krishna is saying the following. In the state of perfection called trance or samādhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samādhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the supersoul, and the monist thinks this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras 433, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanang Pratiprasavaha Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishta Va citi-shaktir iti. This citi-shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist, but according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Cheto-darpana marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called svarupena vyavastitihi. The Bhagavad-gita also confirms this situation in this verse. So after nirvana or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, svarupena vyavastitihi, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his word Kaivalyam Svarupa Pratishta va citi-shaktir iti. This citi-shakti, or transcendental pleasure, is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Bhyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called sampragyata samadhi and asampragyata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researchers, he is said to have achieved sampragyata samadhi. In the asampragyata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, the perfections, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practice Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, but there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous toward incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative, but he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. as stated in the Bhagavad-gita, Agama payino nityas tangstitikshasva bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. So that was the end of quite a long and complicated, technical, I would say, purport of the Bhagavad-gita, but I will go through everything, so don't worry. And if anyone has any questions, then you can just tell me, because I will not see if you're raising the hand. You just turn on the microphone and you can ask a question. All right, so I will then chant the mantras for auspiciousness. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militan Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So once again, before I start, I would like to greet those who are new here today. Feel most welcome. And okay, so let's get started. We go through the, let's see if we can go through everything. Otherwise, we continue next Wednesday. And this will be around 45 minutes to 1 hour, this lecture. So Lord Krishna is saying, in the stage of perfection called trance or samādhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. So this means samādhi means that you are actually completely focusing the mind, because the previous verse, which we read before this one, is talking about the mind being unwavering, like the candle, the fire of a candle. So it's like in a wind, in a place where there is no wind. So then there is also, the candle is not wavering. So like that, the mind of the yogi, it has to reach that stage. Samadhi is actually in Ashtanga Yoga the last part of 8 different ashta. Ashta means 8. So the last part of the 8. So that is, you could say, the prajojana. So prajojana means the goal. And then the other parts are the sambandha, which means that which is connecting you, which is giving you the identity, that, you know, I'm a spirit soul, I'm not this material body, for instance. So that is the sambandha, the knowledge of the sambandha. And then the abhideya means the practice. So how do I realize that I am actually not the body, that I am a spirit soul? How do I realize that? So then you do these yoga practices, and then you reach samadhi, which is the goal. So whenever we are going to study the Bhagavad-gita, then keep these 3 things in mind. You have the sambandha jnana, the knowledge of the field. You have the practice, abhideya, how do I practice in order to reach prayojana, the goal. So in all fields of knowledge, you always have these 3 divisions, also in particularly in the Vedas. So here, Lord Krishna is speaking about the goal. The goal is samadhi, when your mind is completely restrained from all the mental activities and through your yoga practice. So this perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. So you have reached the soul. Soul is described in the Vedas to be of 3 qualities, Sat, Chid, Ananda. So they are transcendental qualities. The eternity, the soul is eternal. Chid means the knowledge, he's full of knowledge. And Ananda, he is full of bliss or happiness. So that's what we are made of. And then the body is the contrary. So it's full of misery, it's full of ignorance, and it's not eternal. So we have a conflict here in the ego, and the yoga will help us to overcome this conflict. The Bhagavad-gita, the knowledge of Bhagavad-gita will help us to overcome that conflict, because we live in a contradictory situation in terms of our eternal existence, our true existence. So that's why, and this conflictory situation is actually creating a lot of conflict within us. And that's why it creates also a lot of misery. When we are applying the identification, when we think I'm the body, I'm the mind, or I'm the material intelligence, when we identify with these external things, and we forget that I'm an eternal soul. So then there are different yoga systems in the Vedas described. Of course, in Krishna consciousness movement, we practice the Bhakti yoga. But Krishna is also explaining the Ashtanga yoga system in this chapter. But ultimately, we have to understand that Ashtanga yoga has its root in Bhakti. So all the principles from the Ashtanga yoga comes actually from the Bhakti. But the difference is that Ashtanga has taken one step a little bit away from the original yoga system. It has deviated, you could say, in one sense, a little bit from the original system. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't work, because ultimately both Bhakti and Ashtanga yoga, they will go to the same goal. It's just that you do it in little different ways. Like there are different religions in the world, and but the principle and the goal for them are actually the same. So it's just that the road comes from, let's say, from north, and the other comes from east, and they meet in the middle, like that. So one thing, also that one practice can lead to the other practice, which we will see here in this explanation, which Prabhupada is giving today. So Lord Krishna is then saying that the perfection, let me see here. Yeah, so this perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self. When you are able to see the self, it means your mind is completely pure. Then you will see the soul, and you will see the super soul. So, and that will produce a lot of happiness when you are no longer contaminated by material consciousness. Like Krishna is explaining, you are situated in boundless or limitless transcendental happiness. And it's realized through transcendental senses. So what does it mean? Transcendental senses means that our senses, which we have now, like the eyes and the ear and nose and all those senses, they have its origin in the soul, because the soul has eyes and nose and ears and how do you say, when you touch things, touch sensation and taste, because the soul has that. That's why the body is constructed upon those senses. So when the senses are free from the material senses, then one can experience the spiritual energy. Now, with our material senses, we experience the material energy. But when we are free from that, we experience the limitless transcendental happiness in from the transcendental senses. So established like this, once one has experienced this and become in samadhi, samadhi means you are firmly now controlling the mind without deviating. So when you are established like that, you will never depart from the truth, meaning you will never fall back again under the material modes of material nature. And when you gain this you will think there is no greater gain. So once one has realized this fantastic experience and transcendental happiness, then one can compare. I can now compare, okay, how was it before when I was under the illusory energy of the Lord, when I was under the modes of material nature? That I didn't feel so much happy, although I was trying to enjoy through my material senses. It was just, on the surface, but it was not the happiness in the heart. But once one realizes this, one can feel this spiritual transcendental happiness, then you can compare which one is actually giving satisfaction to the heart. And that's why you don't fall back, because you don't want to have that option. And when you're situated in this position, never shaken away from that ever again, even if the greatest difficulty would happen, you are still going to stay on that transcendental level of knowledge and happiness. So this indeed is actually freedom, Krishna says, from all miseries arising from material contact. So material contact means senses in contact with a sense object. And then something happens in the brain. I mean, those who knows about these things, endorphins or adrenaline or different things, hormones, which are covering actually our experience, and which are producing a material experience. So through the yoga system, we can get rid of those coverings and come to the level of knowledge. Okay, so I think it's good if anyone has any question now or doubts or whatever, comments. Those are welcome. Now, I don't know if my husband has something he would like to comment.
If they have some question, I mean, I can also try to help, but you explained nicely that it's just a long purport that one may lose a bit the track there. So in that sense, yeah, many questions. I mean,
yeah, or do you
it's
feel
a quite deep philosophical points and like that. But I would like to say one thing that, like you mentioned in Sambandha Pidaya Prachana, also the literature is emphasizing these elements, and Bhagavad-gita is considered to be what gives the Sambandha elements. What are the 5 main elements? Karma, the action, the living entity, the Lord, the time factor, and their relationships. So it's not it's one sense ABC, but it's also aiming to much higher. So without that, we can't get higher. Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining then how to apply that. And when it comes to the colorful cultural elements, how to live the spiritual life, then actually the explanation is in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So in that sense, when we read the scriptures, we can also divide them many different ways. There are also 14 different books of knowledge, but that's very much more complicated. But this way also we can a bit understand, because sometimes devotees are saying that Vedas are a bit conflicted information, like they don't understand actually which category any of those knowledge belongs. So therefore one has to see the whole big picture. And we studied that, for example, 12 years in Mayapur. So it's a bit a way to study, but one can study that shorter under those who have already done that like that. But I'm just saying that like here in Turku, there is Tonnerska Institute with was it 54,000 books or something like that. Vedic library has similar amount. So it's not a small thing that sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Just say some kind of a, but yeah, let's see if there's any question.
Yeah. Yeah, this makes also Srila Prabhupada's purports very unique, because he has also taken this knowledge in his purports. They come from the previous acharyas. So Prabhupada has taken from the previous acharyas, and he has composed his purports on those explanations. So that's makes his purpose quite unique. That's why he's called the founder acharya. Okay, but let's go on then. If nobody has any question, you can just interrupt me any time, no problem. So let's.
Oskari may have some good point.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I have one quick question.
Okay. Yes, maybe.
When you said that the soul also has the five senses, and that's why, like, our material nature is kind of copying or imitating them. If I understood correctly, then the soul, I mean, to get to a human form, it has undergone a lot of different life forms to be born as human one day. How does, if like the soul had five senses the whole time, and at some point in my lives I was, I don't know, a worm or even simpler life form, how does the five senses translate to that? Because I mean, they have very different sense perceptions, or I'm limited in their sense perceptions, and
Yeah. So the more how can I say, the more simple one has become, so then the more limited one is. So it's like a degree of less and less freedom, one could say. The human body is giving a lot of freedom, because it's like an evolution in consciousness. So human consciousness is the most evolved, and there are 400,000 different types of species of human beings, including the demigods, including demoniac species and so on. But they all have the human form, so because they are more evolved in consciousness. But also as a human being, one can commit a lot of sinful activities, and then one will be arrested according to the laws of the material nature, according to Krishna's laws. So in that sense, like today we were out in the forest with my husband, and there are many trees there, and they don't have eyes. They don't, I mean, some touch sensation may be there, but the mouth, the nose, all these things. So according to Vedas, these souls have been doing some sinful activities which have arrested them. So now you stay here in one place and you don't do any nonsense. Now you just produce oxygen and you do something good. So sometimes those five senses have to become covered or even removed for some time. But in the soul, they are always there. But in those other species of life, the senses may be there, they may not be there. In the soul, they are always there. But then the more closer we come to our original identity, which is the soul, then the more the body will actually be manifested in such a way that as the soul. So then, meaning the five senses will be there back again, but they are always there. So it depends on,
For this your good question, I'd like to add that it's said that in the mode of, like, if you see the swimmer on the surface, if the swimmer is just on the surface, you see the form, it looks like, how the swimmer is. But if the swimmer gets a little deeper to the water, the form is a little twisted. And if it gets still, deep diving, you don't anymore see. So the related what he says about the three modes of nature, the more the person is in the mode of goodness, the nearer it is. But then for this, your good question, the key point is what are the senses doing for us? So they are actually creating thinking, feeling, and willing. So now the soul's senses are covered as long we don't think, feel, and will anything related to the Lord. We don't think the Lord's pleasure. We don't feel according to the Lord, and we don't think about the Lord at all. We like to just, when the Friday comes, we like to take the Friday bottle or the Friday smoke cigarette and forget the whole thing. So we don't like to review what happened to the week, where was Lord involved, how it was Lord involved. We don't like to. We like to just ignore. So that's where the form is on the deepest level. What I gave the example, well, I got it from Suhotra Maharaj, that where you don't see the form actually. So we are ignorant. So then the other form is a little more, and like people who likes the nature and live less sinful like that. So then they start to be more like humans and like that. And then spiritualists are those who start to feel for the Lord. They like to think for the Lord, and they, their, how would I say, their life is more Lord-centered. So in the morning they sing for the Lord, they offer their food for the Lord, and then by the absorption process, like I would call, they start to see more and more the Lord in every step, and therefore their life is so happy, because it's called confidential knowledge, due to the thing that confidential is something, even in the personal relationship, the others don't see. So we see something in the normal world, on the nature, in our everyday, daily arrangements, which reminds us from the Lord and is even directly connected to the Lord. So that sense, for your good question, the cutting edge, when you are getting your real senses evoked, your real thinking, feeling, and feeling are start to be more connected to the Lord, and that's normally the situation where we have actually already spiritually connected to the spiritually connected persons, and they can give explanations on the way how this thing is now related to the Lord. So then we start to be more grateful, and then naturally the glorification of the Lord, which is Hare Krishna movement, is known to, but it sometimes start a little the other way. It starts without any understanding and repeating things like a parrot, but it's easier if we want to start to people start to glorify, after studying some university thing for a number of years, and then they start to understand, oh, this teacher is really knowing the thing. He was explaining from the beginning it right, and like that. So then it's a little easier. So therefore it's said the devotional service is easier when the intelligent, we are intelligent way connected to the Lord, than we are just parrots who doesn't understand anything what they're even repeating.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice answer. I hope it was becoming more clear for you, Miri.
Did it make sense? Did you catch what I? That's Mary. Did you catch what I was trying to say? I'm not sure. It's quite complicated topic, but
I'm not sure if I can grasp everything at once, but I think the core of it, the kind of evolution in a way that needs to happen spiritually, and how it's connected in the senses.
Yes.
But I think it takes some time to really understand it.
Yeah, if one is in the mode of ignorance, like my husband said, ignoring the Lord, so then the more far away one gets from one's original self, and then we come back to the original self, like mode of goodness. That's the closest to transcendence, which is supposed to be, the human form. Or potentially, you could say human form. You can also be in ignorance if you're a human being, or passion or goodness. But the unique thing with the human body is that we have the chance now to actually reconnect and advance spiritually. So that's why in the human society, there is always some kind of religion or faith or yoga process which is presented. Yeah, okay. So let's see if I can continue here with the purport a little bit. Prabhupada is saying in the first paragraph, by practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. And that is because the heart is purified. And also in all yoga systems, you have to cultivate knowledge. Or you do some kind of practice, which will, let's say you meditate on mantra. We have Hare Krishna mantra, other people chant other mantras. And the mantra will purify the heart and bring you up to the level of knowledge. So that's why Prabhupada is saying gradually one becomes detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samādhi. And trance, as I explained, it means complete focus of the mind. It's not wavering to any other thoughts, like what am I going to do tomorrow or nothing like that. When you are in trance, when you are meditating, you will not even think, oh, how concentrated I am now. Because if you think, oh, how concentrated I am now, you have actually already lost the concentration. In samadhi, you will be completely like in another world. It's like you have transcended this world and you are connected, completely connected with Krishna in that service. And so after this, one becomes situated in trance, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul. Supersoul is, for those who doesn't know, it's one of the three aspects of this absolute truth. One of them is the impersonal Brahman, meaning the light which comes from Krishna's transcendental body. And then when Krishna enters the material world, he enters as the supersoul, which means he's in every atom, he's in between every atom, and he's in everyone's heart. And he's also this, you could say, the supersoul which awakens the universe. So when you are in trance, in any system of yoga, once you enter into the trance, you will be connected with the supersoul. You will realize the supersoul through not the material mind, Prabhupada is saying here, through the spiritual mind, because the soul also has a spiritual mind. And there is also a spiritual intelligence. So mind and intelligence and ego, it actually originates from the soul. So it's not that it belongs to the material world, but it actually is also a reflection. Like the senses are a reflection, material senses are a reflection. Also, we have those three other. So you realize the super soul, because you can't, like people can say, show me God. I have never seen him. I don't know anyone who has ever seen him. It's because we are covered with these eyes. You could say, in one sense, these eyes are covering us so that we can't see the spirit. We can only perceive the material world with these eyes. So in one sense, they make us blind for the spiritual world. But once the senses have become purified through the yoga system, we will, with this, not with these senses, but with our transcendental senses, we will be able to see the Supreme Lord and perceive him through those different intelligence and mind, like Prabhupada is saying here. And so we realize the super soul. He is in the heart. He's always with us. And without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. This is one problem for the yogi. Sometimes when he is in trance and he's meditating, he will see this Vishnu form of the super soul. And he will think, this is me. And why will he think so? If he doesn't have enough knowledge, he will think like that. because the soul has the same qualities as the super soul. So one is very, very close, and one may think by mistake, this is actually me. So then Prabhupada is saying yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Sometimes, so Patanjali is one of the philosophers, 6 philosophies which are there in the Vedas. And the philosophy which we in the Krishna consciousness movement we are studying is called Vedanta philosophy. So these 6 philosophies, they are called the theistic philosophies, although some of them are maybe not theistic in the sense that they accept God as the supreme. But why are they called theistic is because they accept the Vedas. That's why they are called theistic. So Patanjali's philosophy is one of those. And some, Prabhupada is then explaining, some unauthorized commentators, meaning of this Bhagavad-gita, try to identify the individual soul with the super soul. So this is another philosophy, and he calls them the monist. Monist, mono means one, meaning one will think the soul and the super soul, or the small little soul and God are the same. So Prabhupada is saying that the monist, he think this to be liberation when we become one, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. So this is a very deep philosophical point. I'll try to explain that, let's say, the monist, he think, okay, if I, as a soul, I merge with the super soul. Okay, so I lose my identity. When I merge, I'm actually losing my identity because I will become one. It's like, let's say you have a drop of water, you put it in the sea, and it's gone. It has lost its shape and everything. It has become one with the sea, like that. So some people will think, some philosophers, they think that the soul will be one and lose its identity like that. But if we go back to chapter 2 in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is clearly saying this will never happen. He's saying that the soul can never be divided, and it has always been an individual identity, and it will always remain an individual identity. So Krishna is saying this is never going to happen, but there are philosophers who say that it can happen. So the happiness, the transcendental happiness or pleasure in the Patanjali system, which is explained here, is that when the soul comes in contact with the super soul, there will be a happiness. But then those who believe in the oneness, they think, no, this is an illusion. This happiness is an illusion, because they are afraid that their philosophy will be, how do you say, exposed to be false. And that's why they don't accept transcendental bliss in the soul in connection with God. Because then it will be exposed that their theory is actually just a theory and not reality. So I don't know if this makes it, if someone understands what I'm trying to say, or is it too philosophical now? Or do you have any questions on what I explained? Seems like everyone has understood. Otherwise, just let me know, and I'll continue a little bit more here. So that was Patanjali system, and the monist versus devotees. Devotee will never think I am Krishna. he will think I am an eternal servant of Krishna, but never that I am or I have become Krishna. So that's the difference between these schools. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept that. Yeah, the duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. So Patanjali Muni, he is actually supporting it. So it means that his philosophy is not monistic. The great sage declares in the Yoga Sutra, and then it was this complicated spirituality Sanskrit verse, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprashayam Kaivalyam Svarupa Pratishta Va citi-shaktir iti. And then Prabhupada explaining citi-shakti, which is actually very important to know for those who are studying the Bhagavad-gita and for those who are practicing spiritual life. Citi-shakti, it means the internal potency. It is actually transcendental. So let's say you don't know anything about spiritual life. And for the first time, you go to a Hare Krishna temple and you sit down and you just listen to the mantra. Devotees are singing, it's very nice. You close your eyes and you just focus on the mantra. The mantra is transcendental. It's citi-shakti. It's the internal, it comes through the internal potency. It descends from the spiritual world into the material world through the heart of the devotee. And then the soul, which has never had that experience, he come in contact with that mantra, and he will feel free, he will feel transcendental bliss, because now he has transcended the material energy, and he has come in contact with his citi-shakti, which comes through the Guru Parampara, actually. That's how it comes into the material world. And this is like very mystical things, which I'm speaking about now, but that is, according to the Vedas, how the spiritual energy actually comes here. But we are also spiritual energy. Ultimately, we are, according to the 7th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, you are an eternal soul. You are not a material body. So you belong actually to that internal potency. It's just that we are bewildered right now. Why are we here in this material world, in the material body, if we are a spirit soul, one may ask? But that's because we want to be independent from Krishna. We don't want to serve him. So that's why we have taken the birth here. But then at one point we might have thought, I have everything, but I still feel unsatisfied. What is wrong with me? And then we will come in contact with a spiritual path, and Krishna is going to teach us. This is why, because you can never be satisfied. You are not matter. You are spirit. Spirit can only be satisfied by coming in contact with the Supreme Spirit. So this is how it works. And especially when now we have a human body, we should actually do our best and take time, not for economic development, but I mean, of course, we need economy, but that should not be the primary goal in our life. But the economy should support our spiritual practice, actually. So as much time as we can to spend, on the spiritual practice and developing the knowledge, developing through the Hare Krishna mantra, for instance. One can chant every day Hare Krishna mantra. It doesn't matter if one belongs to some other path, doesn't matter. The Hare Krishna mantra is Hare Krishna mantra. It's spiritual energy which will awaken the soul and awaken that relationship which we have, our original identity, which we are. So that will work. Like my Guru Maharaj, he has some nuns who live in a monastery, Christian monastery. They're chanting Hare Krishna mantra every day. So this mantra is universal, because it doesn't belong to, you can't put the mantra in a box that only it belongs to this path, but God's name is God's name. So that's how it works. Okay, I think we will have to continue next Wednesday with the rest of the purport, because it's quite an the purport is quite philosophically intense, I would say, and it needs a lot of explanation. But if anyone has any questions or comments, then you can. Don't be shy, even if you may think this is not a good question. Sometimes those are the best questions, actually. So. Okay. I can turn off the recording and then we can see. Maybe it's